Hello guys and welcome to today's video. As you can see on the screen, we're straight in with the 8.3.6 Cerastes fight. It's going to be the 8.3.6 boss. Full breakdown, how we're going to go about fighting him, what the easiest ways to take him down, and who are the best champs, because there are some best champs for this. So if we start with the basics of this Cerastes, in the top right there you can see he's got three symbols, all that start at 300 in the first phase. These are hitting into the block, knocking him down, and hitting him with a striker. So every time you do that, one of those things, so for the first one, every time you hit, you knock him down, you minus 100. Every time you hit into his block, you minus 100. And for the third one, every time you use your striker, you hit into 100. So thanks to MCOC Noob, there's a very good sort of pattern of play that you can use here for this boss, and that allows you to sort of crack all these down quite quickly. You'll see once one goes down to 0, it will start ticking. Once you knock another one down, so if you corrupt, say you knock him down 3 times, that will go down to 0. Then if you hit with your relic twice and it's on 200, while that other one is on 0, it will tick down, and then you'll want to you'll use your relic so that one then expires, goes to 0. You want to get them all down to 0 at once, and then he'll go into sort of a shutdown mode, or a corrupted armor mode, and you can do sort of a lot of damage for that phase. But we'll talk through each phase individually and the ways to play. That's just a brief sort of outline of the fight. So let's jump into that, talk about some of the best counters, and then we'll go on to talk about the phases. So for the best champions, you can see I'm using Gore. The Gore, I don't feel I was that great with Gore. You'll see I hardly do any damage, but the next champion I bring in will be Venom. So the best champs for this are champs with lots of unique buffs. That tends to be a lot of cosmic champs. So Gore works really well. Angela works really well. You can bring in Hercules. There's nothing against bringing in Hercules. It's just that he doesn't have so many unique buffs. So if you bring in Odin pre-fight, that does help you out quite a bit. I used Venom because I wasn't going to use many team revives. So as I mentioned in the last video, if you just bring in one champion, that you're going to revive, it's cheaper than it is team revives if you only need like 2 or 3. You know, if you end up needing a few more than that, then obviously that ends up being a little bit different. So I did use Venom and Gore. They were the two main champions. Mainly Venom, just because he did some massive damage. He had a lot of unique buffs and a bit easier to play, but simpler. Didn't have to constantly try and refresh my unique buffs with Gore. So Venom and Gore Angela are probably the best champions for this. If you can bring them in, that will help you out a lot more. Just because for each unique buff, you do an extra 5 stack of damage. So instead of 100, you might be doing 110, 115, which may not seem like a lot more, but it does help you out in those later phases. So a bit more about the boss, since those are the champs you should use. As with a lot of these bosses, they do have a lot of immunities to slow, neutralize, power drain, power lock. You can't modify their ability accuracy. So champs, you don't really need that for this fight anyway. So I would just say still concentrate on those cosmic champs that I've previously laid out. You know, somebody like Hulkling also works really nicely for this. So the only problem with those champions is that champions like Hulkling, every time you get indestructible or immortality, Cerastes will get a indestructible buff of their own for 6 seconds. So if you're doing that quite often, it can be a bit of a pain. However, he does only get that once per fight, so Hercules won't get his immortality, but he will do a lot of damage. So it's sort of that balancing act that you want. Yeah, definitely worth thinking about when you're choosing which champions to bring in. So talking about Cerastes, I know we're sort of 4.5 minutes in, but let's get on to mainly the ways to play him, and the phases. So he has the corrupted armor variants, as mentioned, the leg, the shield, and the spirit. So they all start at 300 in the first phase. Each time you either knock him down or hit him with a relic or hit into his block, it's minus 100, or more, dependent on what champion you're using. These limit your attack, so he takes minus 30% damage for each one. So when they're all done, he's taking minus 90% damage the whole fight. When they're all knocked down, you can do a lot more damage. With that, you may be thinking, well, the spirit gain one might be tricky. Well, in this fight, you have 350% extra spirit gain. So throwing that relic, the higher the relic, obviously, the quicker that spirit, the striker charges up. But you can use that quite often. You can get into a little rotation, which I always thought was quite helpful when I was doing the fight, and that was to go through quite a sort of a regular rotation. So I would use the striker, which would minus 100 of his spirit. I would then knock him down with when that stun is on. 5-hit combo into his block after, and that would mean he's completely wounded. That does work. The one I preferred was a second type of rotation, which was I'd use the striker, I'd knock him down, he'd have his SP1 ready, I'd wait for him to throw it, then dash back in, hit once into his block, repeat that 3 times, you knock him down, as you can see on screen here. I'm baiting his SP1, obviously not that time, I've been smashed by the plasma, but I still hit into the block. There, I've knocked him down. I'll hit him a couple more times, wait for him to throw his special attack. You see I'm still doing 20k damage there because all of 2 of his armors are corrupted. You can see I've just hit into his block, and then that time I messed up the rotation, but with the hit in the block last, it is probably the easiest one. As long as you get the relic down first, the fight becomes quite easy, I think, because you get used to the rotations that you need for especially the first phase and the second phase. Not too much changes throughout the fight, and if you continue with the same rotation of using your striker when it's ready, you can see here baiting my special attack, hitting into the block, waiting, then using my striker, knockdown, bait the SP1. When it eventually happens, go on, there it is, dash in, hits into his block, and I just constantly repeat that, as you can see on screen, and it just makes the fight an absolute ton easier. So phase 1 is quite easy. It's just the initial phase. It's very, very simple. You're just taking his stacks down from 300 to 0. Basically, if you you do that all once, you will do enough damage to take him to 91% health or 90% health, and then that will start the second phase. Second phase is where it gets a little bit more complicated, but just quickly, as you can see on screen, when you finish a phase, he goes into overdrive. To stop that, you have to intercept him, as you saw there, and then the next phase begins. So what is phase 2? Phase 2 is the longest phase. It's from 90% health to 51%, so it is by far the longest. The only difference here is there's 2. They are that Cerastes starts with 225 instead of 300 stacks. If you corrupt one armor, so you can see here I corrupted with the relic. If I was to throw the relic or hit into his block again, he would regenerate all of that armor. So if I was to hit into the block once and then hit into the block a second time, he regens 100% of that armor. You take a little bit of damage back, and you have to take down that again completely. So it can sort of mess up your rotation. You want to keep to the exact same rotation because it still works. It does also mean that you're not repeating steps, so he's not constantly recharging. If you can get that rotation right for phase 2, it's really not too much of an issue, and it should be quite easy to take him down without much damage taken from you, of course. So in phase 3, which is the phase on screen now, Cerastes becomes stun immune, which is a bit more of a contentious point. You can no longer stun him and knock him down, but keep him with the relic stun still works, as you can see on screen. And the other issue is that he starts with a random stack number between 50 and 250. So he might have 50 on the knockdown, so you only have to knock him down once. But 250 on the relics, you've got to hit him with a relic almost 3 times. So this will test your ability to remember what the stacks are, change the way you're playing dependent on the type of stack number that it is, and that's sort of the main challenge of this is to be aware. You can see on screen now, like the knockdown started on 50, so I can only knock him down once, but you can see that the third relic is ticking. So the key there is that while it's ticking, you take out another one of the armors, so you have that corrupted armor, and that refreshes the previous timer so that you can get all 3 down. It is a lot more difficult this phase because you have to be so aware of what Cerastes' stack numbers are, but once you get used to it, it shouldn't be too much of an issue. You can see here I've bought in Quicksilver for absolutely, I've no idea why I've done this. But Venom really was the one who worked for me. You can see I took down basically a lot of the phases, and I just messed up there on the SP2. Talking of the SP2, that is a massively key point that I missed out at the beginning. Make sure that you keep Cerastes to an SP1, because that SP2 is very difficult. Well, you can't dex it, and if you take damage from it, you will take those plasmas, and it ends up being quite a lot of damage. So the best way to play this phase is to keep all of the values quite similar. That will be by, if you've got 250 on the relic one, but 50 on each, let those tick up while you just use your relic a couple times. Because that way, you're able to play it a little bit easier. You'll see I'll die with Quicksilver here, just on a side note, but that doesn't matter. What I will also say is that when one of the corrupted armors is corrupted, if you try and use that again, so if you've got hitting into the block as 0 and you try and hit into the block another time, he will refresh all of that damage, and or he will refresh that whole stack. It'll go to 300. He'll go into overdrive, and you'll get knocked back and take a little bit damage. So you've really just got to be careful. Like I said, be aware of the different stack numbers, and then how that should change with your playstyle. So in a minute, we'll be going into the last phase. That will be with Venom. I will die here, and that phase is by far the easiest. I think I did use a revive, which was which I was really frustrated by. I should have not needed to, but unfortunately that's life. So phase 4 is the easiest phase. It's from 5% to 0%. He will start in overdrive, so you do have to intercept him, as you'll see here. I can't remember if I fail. I'm still in phase 3, but once you've intercepted him, he will go unstoppable. You want to try and intercept him on his side of the screen, because that then becomes a lot easier to do the phase. We'll just wait and play this out, and then we'll talk about the phase while it's happening, because it's a lot easier for you guys to understand that way. But you can see I've almost got this phase down. I'm keeping to the same one. I'm looking that I know the relic and the knockdown are about the same number now, so I can knock him down. I should be able to do quite a bit of damage, get him into the final phase, and then that shall be the fight. Venom did work really, really well for this. He just ended up doing massive numbers, especially with those bleeds. So here we are. Cerastes is now in the last phase. You've got to intercept him to start it, and then it's all about, you can see he's unstoppable. He's taking about 10-12k damage each second. You just got to wait until he goes down to 0% health, until that timer just below his HP number goes, and then you hit into his block with a light attack, and bang, that is fight over. Hopefully this video has helped you out. If it has, please leave a like in the comments down below, and I'll see you in the next one.